Maya Rodriguez had perfected the art of being invisible. At 17 years old, she moved through the busy hallways of Oak Valley High School like she was made of air. While other students laughed loudly, gossiped by their lockers, and made plans for weekend parties, Maya kept her eyes down and her footsteps quiet. She had learned long ago that being noticed usually meant being picked on, and she had enough problems at home without adding school drama to the mix. Every day followed the same pattern. Maya would slip into school just as the first bell rang, avoiding the crowded entrance where the popular kids gathered. She'd grab her books from her locker quickly, never making eye contact with anyone nearby. During classes, she sat in the back corner, always prepared with the right answers, but never volunteering to speak unless called upon directly. When teachers asked questions, Maya would look down at her notebook, hoping to remain unseen even though she usually knew the answers better than anyone else in the room. But everything changed during lunch period. While most students crowded into the cafeteria or hung out in the courtyard, Maya had discovered something special. Deep in the school's east wing, past the storage rooms and forgotten classrooms, there was an old music room that nobody seemed to remember existed. The door was always unlocked, and inside sat a beautiful but neglected upright piano that looked like it hadn't been tuned in years. The first time Maya had wandered into that room, she was just looking for a quiet place to eat her sandwich in peace. She'd been running from a group of girls who had been making fun of her thrift store clothes, and she'd ducked into the first open door she could find. But when she saw that piano sitting there in the dusty afternoon light, something inside her chest fluttered like a bird trying to escape a cage. Maya had never taken piano lessons. Her family couldn't afford luxuries like music classes or instruments. But somehow, when she sat down on that wobbly piano bench and placed her fingers on the yellowed keys, magic happened. The sounds that came out weren't perfect, but they felt right. It was like the piano had been waiting for her all along from that day forward. Maya spent every lunch period in that forgotten room. She taught herself to play by watching free videos on her cracked phone screen, pausing and rewinding until her fingers could find the right positions. She started with simple melodies, the kind that children learn in their first piano lessons, but Maya was hungry for more. She absorbed everything she could find online, from classical pieces to modern songs, from basic scales to complex compositions. That made her brain work in ways she never knew possible. The piano became her best friend, her therapist, and her escape all rolled into one. When she played, the stress of her home life melted away. She forgot about her mother working 2 jobs just to pay rent, forgot about her little brother asking for help with homework she barely understood herself, forgot about the empty refrigerator and the overdue bills stacked on their kitchen counter. At home, their apartment was cramped and always noisy. Maya shared a bedroom with her 8-year-old brother, Luis, while her mother slept on the living room couch. Their neighbor upstairs practiced drums at all hours, and the family next door seemed to have arguments that lasted until dawn. But in that music room, surrounded by dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun, Maya found the peace she craved. Her mother, Carmen, worked at 2 different restaurants, pulling double shifts that left her exhausted and barely present. She left for work before Maya woke up for school and came home long after Maya had put Luis to bed. On the rare occasions when they were all home together, Carmen was usually too tired to do much besides heat up leftover food and collapse in front of the television. Maya had become the adult in their household by necessity. She made sure Luis did his homework, packed both their lunches with whatever they had in the kitchen, and kept their small apartment as clean as possible. She'd learned to stretch $1 further than most adults, shopping for groceries with coupons and making meals from rice, beans, and whatever vegetables were on sale, but none of that mattered when she was playing piano. In that room, she wasn't the girl whose shoes had holes in them or whose mother forgot to sign permission slips. She wasn't the teenager who had to decline every school event because there was no money for tickets or new clothes. In that room, Maya was just a girl making beautiful music, and for 45 minutes every day, that was enough. The more she played, the more ambitious she became. Maya started writing her own melodies, simple at first but growing more complex as her skills improved. She would hum these tunes while walking home from school, developing them in her mind before trying them out on the piano the next day. Some melodies came from her dreams, others from the sounds of the city around her, the rhythm of buses stopping and starting, the musical quality of rain on windows, the way Louis laughed when something made him truly happy. Maya never told anyone about her secret musical life. She was afraid that if she spoke about it out loud, somehow the magic would disappear. She was also afraid that someone might decide the music room should be locked up or used for something else. So she kept her talent hidden, just like she kept everything else about herself hidden from the world. As winter approached, Maya noticed that her fingers were getting stronger and more confident on the keys. She could play pieces now that had seemed impossible just months before. Sometimes, when she was really lost in the music, she would forget to worry about someone walking in and discovering her. Those were the moments when her playing became truly special, when emotion poured through her fingertips and filled the room with something that felt almost holy. One afternoon, as she was packing up her things after an especially good practice session, Maya noticed a flyer that had been slipped under the music room door. It was bright yellow and announced auditions for the school's annual talent show. For just a moment, Maya allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to play her music for other people, to share the beautiful sounds that lived in her heart. But the moment passed quickly. Maya crumpled up the flyer and threw it in the trash. By the door, girls like her didn't perform on stages. Girls like her stayed in the shadows, grateful for whatever small pieces of beauty they could find in the corners of the world that nobody else wanted. Still, as she walked home that evening, Maya couldn't stop thinking about that flyer. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had something worth sharing. But that voice was quickly drowned out by all the louder voices telling her to stay quiet. Stay hidden, stay safe. Maya didn't know it yet, but her quiet world was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. The music that lived inside her was too big to stay hidden forever. And sometimes the most unexpected people are the ones who end up changing everything. Mrs. Chun had been teaching music at Oak Valley High School for almost 30 years. She thought she had heard every type of student musician there was, the naturally gifted ones, the hard workers who made up for lack of talent with dedication, and the ones who were just there because they needed an easy elective credit. But on that rainy Thursday afternoon in November, when she heard the haunting melody drifting from the old music room, she knew immediately that this was something different. She had been staying late to grade papers when the sound reached her ears. At first, she thought maybe someone had left a radio playing, but as she listened more carefully, she realized it was live piano music. The melody was complex and emotional, played with a sensitivity that made her stop everything she was doing. Mrs. Chun quietly made her way down the hallway, following the music like it was calling to her. When she peered through the small window in the music room door, she couldn't believe what she saw. There was Maya Rodriguez, the quiet girl from her third period music appreciation class, sitting at the old piano and playing the most beautiful arrangement of Chopin she had ever heard from a student. But this wasn't just any arrangement. Maya had clearly modified it, adding her own emotional touches that made the classical piece sound fresh and deeply personal. Mrs. Chen stood frozen outside that door for nearly 10 minutes, listening as Maya moved from Chopin into what sounded like an original composition. The music told a story without words, starting soft and melancholy, then building into something powerful and hopeful. It was the kind of playing that gave you goosebumps and made you forget to breathe. When Maya finally stopped playing, Mrs. Chun waited a moment before gently knocking on the door. She heard a sharp intake of breath from inside, followed by the sound of the piano bench scraping against the floor. Maya opened the door looking like she had been caught doing something wrong, her face flushed with embarrassment and panic. Sorry, Maya said immediately, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I'm not supposed to be in here. I'll leave right now. I won't come back, I promise. But Mrs. Chun just smiled and shook her head. Maya, honey, you're not in trouble. That was the most beautiful piano playing I've heard in years. How long have you been playing? Maya looked down at her shoes, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. I don't really play, not really. I just mess around sometimes during lunch. That wasn't messing around, Mrs. Chun said gently. That was real music, made by someone with genuine talent. Where did you learn to play like that? What came out next shocked Mrs. Chun even more than the beautiful music had. Maya explained in halting sentences how she had been teaching herself by watching videos on her phone. She talked about the broken keyboard at home that only had half its keys working. She mentioned practicing finger exercises on her desk during boring classes. Imagining the music in her head when she couldn't actually play, Mrs. Chun had taught hundreds of students over the years, many of whom had expensive private lessons and top-quality instruments at home. But she had never encountered raw, natural talent like this, and certainly not in someone who was completely self-taught. Maya, she said carefully, have you ever thought about performing? There are competitions, scholarships, opportunities. For someone with your ability. Maya's reaction was immediate and strong. She stepped backward, shaking her head vigorously. Oh no, I could never do that. I can't perform in front of people. I can barely order food at restaurants without my voice shaking. I'm not a performer, I'm nobody. But Mrs. Chun saw something in Maya that the girl couldn't see in herself. Over the next few weeks, she began staying after school more, often always finding reasons to walk past the old music room during lunch. Sometimes she would stop and listen from the hallway, amazed by how Maya's playing continued to evolve and improve. One day, Mrs. Chun brought in some sheet music, pieces that were technically challenging but emotionally rich. She left them on the piano with a note that simply said, "For the talented musician who practices here." Maya never acknowledged the gift directly, but Mrs. Chun noticed that the music disappeared, and within days she could hear Maya working. Through the new pieces, the breakthrough came in early December. Mrs. Chun had been trying for weeks to convince Maya to let her record just a short video of her playing, thinking it might help Maya see her own talent more clearly. Maya had refused every time, but on this particular day she seemed different, more open, maybe a little less afraid. Just one song, Mrs. Chun had said. No one else has to see it. It's just for you, so you can hear yourself the way others hear you. Maya had agreed reluctantly, and Mrs. Chun used her phone to record 3 minutes of Maya playing an original piece she had been working on. The composition was called Finding Home, and it captured something beautiful about belonging, and hope that made Mrs. Chun's eyes fill with tears. When they watched the video together afterward, Maya seemed stunned. That's really me playing? She asked, as if she couldn't believe her own ears. That's you, Mrs. Chun confirmed. That's your gift, Maya, and gifts like this aren't meant to be hidden away in empty rooms. What Mrs. Chun did next would change everything, though Maya wouldn't find out about it until much later. The regional talent competition had extended their application deadline, and they were specifically looking for undiscovered talent from local schools. Mrs. Chun had been thinking about it for weeks, and after seeing Maya's reaction to her own playing, she made a decision that evening. Mrs. Chun went home and carefully filled out an application for Maya. She wrote about the girl's incredible natural ability, her dedication to learning despite having no formal training, and the emotional depth of her musical expression. Most importantly, she uploaded the video of Finding Home as Maya's audition submission. Mrs. Chun knew she was taking a risk. Maya had never given permission for this, and there was a chance the girl would be angry or feel betrayed. But Mrs. Chun had been teaching long enough to recognize once-in-a-lifetime talent when she heard it. She couldn't let Maya's fear and self-doubt rob the world of something so beautiful. 3 weeks later, Maya's phone rang during her lunch practice session. The voice on the other end was professional and excited, congratulating her on being selected as one of 50 contestants for the regional competition. Maya sat in stunned silence as the woman explained that her audition video had been absolutely remarkable, and that the judges were eager to see her perform live. When Maya finally found her voice, all she could manage was, "I think there's been a mistake." But there was no mistake. Mrs. Chun had given Maya the push she needed, even if Maya didn't know it yet. The quiet girl who had been hiding her light under a bushel was about to step into a much bigger spotlight than she had ever imagined possible. Maya stared at her phone for a full minute after the call ended, wondering if she was dreaming. The woman from the competition had sounded so sure, so professional. Talking about performance schedules and television cameras like these were normal, things that happened to people like Maya. But nothing about this felt normal or real. Her first instinct was to call them back and explain that they had made a terrible mistake. She wasn't a performer. She was just a girl who played piano alone, in an empty room, because it made her feel less lonely. The idea of playing in front of actual people, let alone judges and cameras, made her stomach twist into knots so tight she thought she might be sick. But when she tried to call the number back, she kept hanging up before anyone answered. Finally, she decided to find Mrs. Chun. If anyone would know what to do about this confusion, it would be her music teacher. Maya found Mrs. Chun in her classroom after school, organizing sheet music for the next day's classes. When Maya told her about the phone call, Mrs. Chun's face lit up with a smile that was both proud and a little guilty. "Mrs. Chun," Maya said slowly, studying her teacher's expression, Did you submit that video?" Mrs. Chun sat down heavily in her chair and nodded. "I did, Maya. I know I should have asked permission first, but I was afraid you would say no. And talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away." Maya felt a rush of emotions she couldn't sort through. Anger, terror, gratitude, and panic all mixed together until she didn't know whether to cry or run away. "But I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't perform in front of people. You don't understand. I'm not like other kids. I can't even raise my hand in class without my voice shaking." Mrs. Chun stood up and walked over to Maya, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know you're scared. But Maya, I've been teaching music for 30 years, and I've never heard anyone play with the emotion and skill that you have. This competition could change your life. There are scholarships, opportunities, doors that could open for you." Maya thought about her mother, working double shifts just to keep them afloat. She thought about Luis, who needed new shoes but wouldn't ask because he knew money was tight. She thought about their broken keyboard at home and the dreams she had. Never dared to speak out loud. "What if I mess up?" Maya asked. "What if I freeze up there and can't play anything? What if everyone realizes I'm just a fraud who doesn't belong?" "Then you'll still be exactly who you are right now," Mrs. Chun said firmly. "But Maya, what if you don't mess up? What if you're amazing? What if this is the chance you've been waiting for without even knowing it?" That evening, Maya went home and told her mother about the competition. Carmen was washing dishes after another long day at the restaurant, and at first, she didn't seem to understand what Maya was saying. "A competition?" Carmen turned around, soap suds still on her hands. "Mia, when did you learn to play piano?" "We don't even have a piano." Maya explained about the music room, about teaching herself, about the videos on her phone. She played some of her melodies on their broken keyboard, working around the dead keys. As she played, she watched her mother's expression change from confusion to amazement to something that looked like pride mixed with worry. "This is beautiful, Maya," Carmen said softly. "I had no idea. But honey, competitions cost money. There will be travel, maybe clothes, things we can't afford right now." "I know, Mama. Maybe I should just forget about it." But Lise, who had been listening from the doorway, suddenly spoke up. "No way! Maya, you have to do this. This could be huge for our family. Besides, you're the smartest person I know. If anyone can figure out how to make this work, it's you." Over the next few days, Maya couldn't stop thinking about the competition. She looked up videos of previous years online, watching confident teenagers in expensive clothes playing on grand pianos that probably cost more than her family made in a year. Everyone looked so polished, so prepared, so different from her, but Mrs. Chun wouldn't let Maya give up. She started staying after school to coach Maya, helping her choose the perfect piece to perform. Maya had written several original compositions by now, but she was afraid they weren't sophisticated enough for a real competition. "Maya," Mrs. Chun said during one of their practice sessions, "your original music is what makes you special. Anyone can play Chopin or Bach, but only you can play Maya's music. They settled on a piece Maya had written called Letters to Tomorrow. She had composed it during a particularly difficult week when their electricity had been shut off and she had been feeling hopeless about the future. The melody started soft and sad, but gradually built into something powerful and optimistic, like a conversation between who she was now and who she hoped to become someday. The weeks leading up to the competition became a whirlwind of preparation. Carmen managed to get a few days off work, even though they couldn't afford it. Mrs. Chun helped them figure out transportation to the competition venue, which was 2 hours away. Maya's Aunt Rosa, who worked at a department store, used her employee discount to help them find a simple, black dress that would look appropriate on stage, but as the date got closer, Maya's anxiety grew worse instead of better. She started having panic attacks during practice sessions, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't hit the right keys. She would lie awake at night imagining all the ways she could embarrass herself, all the reasons why she didn't belong in a competition with real musicians. 1 week before the competition, Maya called Mrs. Chun sobbing. "I can't do this," she cried into the phone. "I watched more videos online, and everyone is so much better than me. They've been playing since they were little kids. They have professional teachers and expensive instruments. I'm going to look like an idiot up there." Mrs. Chun listened patiently to all of Maya's fears. "Maya," she said finally, "do you remember the first time I heard you play? I wasn't thinking about your technique or your training. I was thinking about how your music made me feel. That's what real music does. It touches people's hearts. All those other contestants might have better training, but none of them have your story, your heart, your unique way of expressing emotion through music. But what if I freeze up there?" Then you take a deep breath, close your eyes, and remember why you started playing in the first place. Remember that little room where you found your voice. Remember that music is your friend, not your enemy. The night before they were supposed to leave for the competition, Maya sat at their broken keyboard one last time, playing Letters to Tomorrow with all the emotion she could manage. Luis sat next to her on the couch, and Carmen stood in the kitchen doorway, both of them listening to every note. When she finished, Luis clapped enthusiastically. "Maya, that was incredible. You're going to blow everyone away tomorrow." Maya looked at her little brother's confident smile and her mother's proud expression, and for the first time in weeks she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. Not because she was the best pianist in the competition, but because her music came from a real place, from struggles and dreams that were completely her own. Tomorrow would bring cameras and judges and a stage bigger than anything she had ever imagined. But tonight she was just Maya, surrounded by the people who loved her, making beautiful music in their small apartment where it all began. The morning of the competition, Maya woke up at 5 a.m. with her heart racing. She had barely slept, tossing and turning while her mind ran through every possible thing that could go wrong. What if she forgot how to play? What if her hands started shaking and she couldn't hit the right keys? What if she fainted on stage in front of everyone? Carmen was already up, making coffee in their small kitchen. She had taken the day off work, something that would hurt their budget but meant everything to Maya. Lise was still asleep on the couch, but he had made Maya a good luck card the night before with stick figures of her playing piano and the words, "My sister is a star," written in his messy handwriting. "How are you feeling, Mia?" Carmen asked, wrapping her daughter in a warm hug. Terrified, Maya admitted honestly. "I keep thinking I should call them and say I'm sick." "But you're not sick," Carmen said gently. "You're just scared. And that's normal. Even professional musicians get nervous before big performances." The drive to the competition venue felt both too long and too short at the same time. Maya sat in the back seat with Lise, trying to practice her piece by moving her fingers silently on her lap. But her hands were trembling too much to be steady. Mrs. Chun had driven separately and would meet them there, along with Maya's aunt Rosa, who had promised to be in the audience cheering her on. When they arrived at the Performing Arts Center, Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. The building was huge and modern, with glass walls and fancy signs announcing the regional young talent competition. There were news vans in the parking lot and people with cameras walking around everywhere. This was so much bigger than anything Maya had imagined. Inside, the lobby was buzzing with activity. Contestants and their families filled every corner, and Maya immediately felt out of place. The other young performers looked so polished and confident. Girls in expensive dresses were warming up their voices, boys in perfectly pressed suits were practicing violin scales, and everyone seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Maya watched a girl about her own age glide past, wearing a sparkly dress that probably cost more than Maya's family spent on groceries in a month. The girl was talking casually to a man with a professional camera, clearly comfortable being the center of attention. Behind her walked what looked like a whole team of people, parents, coaches, maybe even professional stylists. Maya Rodriguez? A woman with a clipboard and a headset appeared beside them. "I'm Jessica, one of the production assistants. Are you ready for your big day?" Maya opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Carmen stepped forward and answered for her. "She's ready. Just a little nervous." Jessica smiled kindly. "That's completely normal. Even our judges get nervous sometimes." "Maya, your audition video was absolutely beautiful. Everyone backstage has been talking about it. We're all excited to see what you do today." They were laid backstage, which was a maze of hallways, dressing rooms, and technical equipment. The noise was overwhelming, people talking on radios, contestants practicing their pieces, families giving last-minute pep talks. Maya felt like she was drowning in all the activity. In the waiting area, Maya sat between her mother and Lise, trying to calm her racing heart. She could hear other contestants performing on stage, their music carrying through the walls. A boy was playing violin so beautifully it made her stomach sink even further. How could she possibly compete with that level of skill, Maya? Mrs. Chun appeared with a warm smile and a bottle of water. "How are you holding up?" "I don't think I can do this," Maya whispered. "Everyone here is so much better than me." "Did you hear that violin player? And there's a girl here who's been on television before. I saw her being interviewed by the news." People. Mrs. Chun sat down next to Maya and spoke quietly so only she could hear. "Maya, I want you to remember something. You're not here to be better than anyone else. You're here to share your music, your story, your heart. That's something nobody else can do, no matter how much training they've had." A few seats away, Maya watched a girl about 12 years old pace back and forth, muttering her song lyrics under her breath. Her parents were giving her last-minute coaching, pointing out everything she needed to remember. The girl looked confident but also stressed, like she was carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. Contestant number 23. "Maya Rodriguez, you're up in 10 minutes, announced someone with a headset. Maya's stomach dropped to her shoes. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, she would be walking onto a stage in front of hundreds of people, with cameras recording everything, performing in front of judges who had probably heard thousands of musicians way better than her. Carmen took her daughter's hands. "Maya, remember what your music teacher said. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to share your gift. And no matter what happens out there, your father would be so proud of you right now." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She rarely talked about her father anymore, but she knew her mother was right. He had always told her she could do anything she set her mind to, even when she was little and afraid of the dark or nervous about starting a new school. Lise grabbed her hand and squeezed it tight. "Maya, you got this. You're the coolest person." "I know, and you're going to show everyone how awesome you are." 5 minutes, Maya, called the production assistant. Mrs. Chun handed Maya a small piece of paper. "I wrote this for you. Read it when you get to the piano before you start playing." Maya unfolded the paper. In Mrs. Chin's neat handwriting, it said, "Music is the language of the heart. Today let your heart speak." "Okay, Maya, it's time." Jessica appeared again, this time with a bigger smile. "Are you ready to show the world what you can do?" Maya stood up on shaky legs. Her family surrounded her with hugs and whispered words of encouragement. Mrs. Chun squeezed her shoulder one more time. "Remember, you belong here just as much as anyone else. Your music brought you here for a reason." As Mia walked toward the stage entrance, she could hear the audience applauding for the contestant who had just finished. Through a gap in the curtains, she caught a glimpse of the stage, a massive space with bright lights and a beautiful grand piano sitting in the center like a throne waiting for its queen. The host was introducing her now, telling the audience about the 17-year-old self-taught pianist from Oak Valley High School. Maya heard her own name echoing through the auditorium and realized there was no turning back now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maya Rodriguez. The curtains opened and Maya stepped into the brightest light she had ever seen. The audience was a sea of faces stretching back further than she could make out clearly. The judges sat at a long table in front of the stage, their expressions friendly but serious. Cameras on rolling stands moved silently around the stage, capturing every moment. Maya walked toward the piano on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Each step echoed in the huge space, and she was certain everyone could hear her. Heart pounding. This was the moment that would either prove Mrs. Chun right about her talent or confirm every fear Maya had ever had about not being good enough. She reached the piano bench and sat down, her hands trembling as she placed them on the keys. The auditorium fell completely silent, hundreds of people waiting to hear what this quiet girl from a small town could do. Maya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and remembered Mrs. Chain's note, "Let your heart speak." It was time to find out if her heart had something worth saying. Maya sat at the piano bench with her hands hovering over the keys, the silence in the auditorium so complete she could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears. The bright stage lights made it impossible to see individual faces in the audience, but she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her, waiting. The judges sat motionless at their table, pens ready to take notes that would determine her fate. For a terrifying moment, Maya's mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember how Letters to Tomorrow was supposed to start. She couldn't remember why she had thought she belonged on this stage. All she could think about was how easy it would be to stand up, apologize, and walk away from this impossible situation. But then she remembered Mrs. Chun's note in her pocket, and something shifted inside her chest. Maya closed her eyes and thought about that dusty music room where this journey had started. She thought about the broken keyboard at home and all the melodies she had created on keys that barely worked. She thought about her father, who used to tell her that the most beautiful flowers often grew in the most unlikely places. When Maya finally placed her fingers on the keys and played the opening notes of Letters to Tomorrow, something magical happened. The sound that came from the grand piano was richer and more beautiful than anything she had ever heard from the old upright at school. It was like her music had been waiting its whole life for an instrument worthy of expressing it. The piece began softly, almost like a whisper. Maya had written it during one of the darkest periods of her life, when their family was struggling the most and the future felt impossible to imagine. The opening melody spoke of loneliness and uncertainty, of a young person trying to find their place in a world that seemed too big and too complicated. As Maya played, the nervousness began to melt away from her body. Her hands stopped shaking and found their natural rhythm on the keys. She forgot about the cameras, forgot about the judges, forgot about everyone watching. This was just her and the music, the way it had always been in that quiet room during lunch periods. In the audience, Carmen felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to her daughter pour her heart out through the piano. She had never heard Maya play a complete piece before, and she was amazed by the depth of emotion coming from someone so young. Beside her, Luis sat perfectly still, his mouth slightly open in wonder, finally understanding why his sister had been so nervous about sharing this incredible gift. Mrs. Chun, sitting a few rows back, felt a mixture of pride and awe watching her student transform before everyone's eyes. This was what she had seen in Maya from the very beginning, not just technical skill, but the rare ability to connect with people through music in a way that touched their souls. On stage, Maya's playing began to evolve as the piece moved into its second movement. The melody grew stronger and more complex, representing the gradual realization that even in difficult times, there was always hope for something better. Her left hand created a steady, comforting rhythm, while her right hand painted pictures of dreams and possibilities above it. Judge Rodriguez, a renowned pianist who had performed in concert halls around the world, found herself leaning forward in her chair. In 30 years of judging competitions, she had heard thousands of young musicians, many with impressive technical training. But this girl was doing something different. She wasn't just playing notes on a page. She was telling a story that everyone in the room could understand and feel. Judge Williams, sitting next to her, had stopped taking notes entirely. He was known for his tough criticism and high standards, but watching Maya play reminded him why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. There was something pure and honest about her performance that cut through all the pretense and competition pressure that usually dominated these events. The third judge, Miss Thompson, felt goosebumps rising on her arms as Maya's music reached its climactic section. The melody soared now, full of strength and determination, representing the moment when someone decides to fight for their dreams, despite all the obstacles in their way. It was impossible not to think about Maya's own story, the girl who had taught herself to play on broken instruments and was now creating magic on one of the finest pianos in the state. In the audience, other contestants and their families had stopped their nervous chatter and were listening in stunned silence. The violin player who had performed earlier felt humbled by the raw emotion in Maya's music. The girl in the expensive dress realized that all her professional training couldn't create the kind of authentic connection Maya was making with everyone in the room. Maya's playing moved into the final movement of Letters to Tomorrow, and this was where her true genius showed. The music became a conversation between her past and future selves, between the scared girl who had hidden in empty rooms and the young woman who was brave enough to stand on this stage. The melody wove together sadness and joy, struggle and triumph, fear and courage in a way that made perfect sense, even though it should have been impossible. As the piece built toward its conclusion, Maya felt like she was flying. Every emotion she had ever felt, every dream she had ever had, every moment of doubt and every spark of hope, it all poured through her fingers and filled the enormous auditorium with sound that seemed to touch everyone present. The final notes of Letters to Tomorrow rang out into the silence, and for a moment that felt like forever, nobody moved. Maya sat with her hands still resting on the keys, hardly believing that she had actually done it. She had shared her music with the world, and somehow the world had listened. Then Judge Rodriguez stood up. She had never given a standing ovation during a competition before, but she couldn't help herself. Judge Williams followed immediately, then Miss Thompson, and within seconds the entire auditorium erupted in applause unlike anything anyone there had ever heard. People were on their feet, clapping and cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. In the audience, Carmen was sobbing with pride while Weiss jumped up and down, shouting, "That's my sister!" At the top of his lungs, Mrs. Chun stood with her hands over her heart, watching her student take in the overwhelming response to her performance. Maya looked out at the sea of standing people and felt like she was dreaming. These hundreds of strangers were applauding for her, for the music that had lived quietly in her heart for so long. Judge Rodriguez was nodding at her with tears in her eyes, mouthing the words "beautiful, just beautiful." When the applause finally died down and Maya stood to take her bow, she realized that everything had changed. Not just because of any prize she might win, but because she had found the courage to let her true self be seen. The quiet girl who had been invisible for so many years had discovered that her voice, when expressed through music, was powerful, enough to move an entire room full of people. As Maya walked off the stage to be reunited with her family, she knew that no matter what happened next, she had already won something more valuable than any competition trophy. She had won the knowledge that her music mattered, that her story was worth telling, and that sometimes the most beautiful songs come from the most unexpected places. The judges would later call her performance transcendent and unforgettable, but Maya would always remember it as the day she stopped hiding and started believing in the magic she carried inside her heart.